Thank you, Aubrey. I think I'm just going to go through some slides before. But first of all, thank you, Aubrey and the organizers for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I hope my ideas are a good way to end this excellent conference. And I hope to be rather quick, because as the last one standing between you and the drinks. So also, first of all, I'm currently based at the University of Texas in medical branch in Galveston. And I'm interested in some of the questions that have been placed here around how to spread the message about longevity and how to reach the public. And at first, I thought it would be having to make the case for being here, but I think many of the talks have addressed this topic, and I think it will be an excellent fit. So I'm going to be quick, and I'm going to be bringing some questions and some comments on, first, the importance of engaging the public, second, on some overview of what surveys have talked about and have examined about engaging with the public. Also the question of what sort of questions are we asking the public, and also how to build the trust in longevity. As has been mentioned before, and particularly, for example, in the Dublin Longevity Declaration, longevity is entering the mainstream. And we are reaching an important point in the movement and in the history of the field in which real possibilities of a life extension are possible. And this also begs the question of how will the public respond and how to better engage with the publics and regulators and policymakers. So I think many of you are already familiar with the importance of engaging the public, but just some comments, bear with me. Some of them is the need to maintain a healthy narrative. So many times the field has been associated with a field only for billionaires, doing experiments on themselves, and that leaves the question of who will benefit from this. Will the average person on the street have access to these treatments, and how in a way this can be alienating for the people. Other issues to take into account involve the importance of the field being taken seriously. It is becoming more established as we speak. And also, as has been mentioned before, as we need politicians and regulatory support, they rely on votes and they depend on public opinion as well. And as Andrew Steele mentioned in the last summit, here the field faces a chronic lack of awareness in the wider public. But how has the field responded to these questions? And this is my views as someone who studies how the field communicates and frames this question. Often the question is one of a lack of knowledge and the need to educate the public under the assumption that the public need more science, more knowledge, and if they had such knowledge, they would support the field. And the community has also put forward ideas as we need a success, first proof of concept, a first victory, and only then we will get enough support. And also there's been a lot of effort on maintaining the credibility of the field and setting distance from snake oil salesmen and promises. And also there has been a lot of attention on rejecting ethical arguments. And the idea, for example, that there will be an overpopulation. Often the reaction is that it's not a valid concern, and the idea is to dismantle why this is a concern. But the message I want to portray here is the importance of asking the public. And if you could take one lesson from this talk is the need for more surveys and actual empirical data of how the public thinks about longevity. These questions have been posed since the early 2000s, as you can see those two commentaries that I point out, and even some key figures in the field have pointed to the need to ask the public what do they want and how do they feel about this. We have some surveys that have been conducted in the past, again, mostly in the early 2000s, not so many recently. And it's interesting to see what sort of questions they have asked and what sort of findings have they presented. I'll just go through some of the key findings that I've identified. Some of them, for example, include that people are both in favor and against longevity, and that might be a bit intuitive, but there's a number of nuances that need to be taken into account. For example, the type of life that a person has. If a person has a good family life, good family connections, financial stable, a good career, they are likely to want to extend their life. And the opposite also applies. People who are usually in a difficult situation financially or socially, they might not be so inclined to support the field. And many surveys agree on figures that around 20 to 30% of the people examined support this life extension. And also this is very influenced by personality, characters, and in particular the idea of what health condition would you be in. People are interested in living longer but healthier. But that brings me to this key idea that publics are made, not found, and let me expand a little bit. And what I mean by this is that publics react to a conversation that is ongoing and certain ways of presenting the questions, informations, and they are not there just with a fixed position on whether they support the field or not. It's the process of many interactions and ideas at stake. And as I have been mentioning, the public as a whole, but of course, it is very varied with a very diverse set of views, which varies according to culture, religion, location, and of course, as I was mentioning, personal experiences. So I want to point attention to this idea of framing. And by framing, I mean the notion that the answers that you will get depends on the questions that you're asking. So I'm asking the community, what sort of questions are we asking and what sort of ideas are we bringing, associating with health span and lifespan? So are we asking the right questions? Some studies have asked this question in ways that I think are very simplistic. So for example, they have asked questions such as emphasizing lifespan. How long people would like to live? Would you like to live up to 150? Would you like to live forever? As I'm showing in one of the images in that box. And there's plenty of emphasis on time and lifespan. And also there's a simplification of the approaches that will be successful. For example, a pill. So there's one study, and several actually, that asks, if you could take one pill to live forever, would you do it? But of course, we're very involved with the field, and we all know very well that there will be a variety of approaches to be taken, different therapies, different strategies that will be successful, and the picture is, of course, way more complicated. But there's good news after all. More recent surveys are posing broader framings, are framing questions in wider ways. For example, you have this survey from the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives last year, and they asked questions associated, for example, with chronic disease and what are the research priorities in the US. So I'm not going to go into the details, but for example, they ask if the government will be more supportive of funding for chronic diseases and what sort of diseases should be supported over others. So that, in a way, broadens the space in which we are asking questions. Yesterday, we had an excellent talk from the Evolution Foundation. They have also conducted a survey in which they're also asking questions about how lifespan is related to the healthcare systems and also to chronic conditions. So that's very positive. But again, coming back to the question of framing, I want to ask if our survey is asking the right questions. And just some recommendations and thoughts on this is that the focus on living longer might not be sufficient to earn attention. It assumes that people already have a position on the topic, people already know what they want, and they already know what the future will look like with this intervention. And also takes for granted that life extension will succeed. Hopefully it will. But there's also the point to be made that often in innovation studies that users don't necessarily know what they want. So what's the answer? How do we go from there? One is to ask, do the messages that we're conveying resonate with people's priorities and values? And asking, what do people care about? What do they value in their lives? And what do they want? I invite you also to move away a little bit from the death versus life dichotomy. And I have this tweet from a very famous figure. We all know Brian Johnson. He wrote, for example, a week ago, "Hey, death defenders, make your best argument." And that's what I call a very contestataриan attitude with the public. And I would dare to say that it's not that people are not in favor of death or that they want death. In many cases, people may have other priorities or other things that they value in life, and the task is how to connect with those emotional aspirations of people. I'm gonna skip that one. So just some recommendations, so we have time for our open conversation. Just a reminder, some of the points for a richer conversation is, what do people care about? What do people value? What experiences have they had, and how have they shaped their attitudes towards life in general? And a key question that I think nobody has asked so far in this conference is about how scientists and longevity advocates and enthusiasts are earning trust. And this question of course, of which ways are more conducive to framing the project of longevity. So some recommendations include understanding the context in which people are making decisions and relating to science. We all know that there's a deficit of trust in science. We saw this with the COVID pandemic, the rejection of vaccines. So there's much work to be done to bring science back to the place it deserves. And also avoid this to be a battle of ethics or a battle of who has the right arguments. Rather, are we on the same page? Do we relate to each other? And do I understand what you want to achieve? I'm just going to go quickly about this idea of public trust, which we can go in the Q&A. I will just only emphasize maybe the third point, that there's plenty of emphasis being placed on evidence and clinical trials and the right information, very trustable evidence. But I would say that it also depends on who is conducting the trials, how they are conducted, how transparent they are, and it's not just a matter of data, but also a matter of whom is behind this. So I'm just gonna end this provocation and this set of ideas with the question of what is longevity biotech for, and that this is something that many people would resonate with. And I call this from an idea of Jack Stilgoe, and I'm going to read this quote, the one I will read. So he says that disagreements about the risk of new technologies often come down to questions of what a technology is for. We place our trust in people, not just when we think they are reliable, but also where we think we have shared purposes. And he writes in the context of AI. So just some final comments and some final thoughts. As you can see in the slides, I'm placing emphasis on the idea of healthy aging and health span, and that could be a very good way to extend an open conversation with the public. I think everybody shares the preoccupation on chronic disease, health issues, and I think we all want to live healthier and avoid disease. And also the emphasis on these advances being accessible for everyone. That's something that will be an important aspect to consider, and also try to understand where ethical objections come from. Rather than dismantling them, try to make an effort of understanding the context. And for example, for many people, ideas of unnaturalness and the cycle of life are very strong. So rather than rejecting them, we need to understand where do they come from and how do they relate to these topics. So, as a conclusion, of course, as the public, we need more surveys, and we need to consider about how the field is portraying its authority and credibility. Well, and thank you for your attention, and it has been a pleasure to offer these ideas and to be in this conference. So please reach out to me with any questions.
Right, so yeah, I mean, I think those were very important points that you were making. Some of them, though, I'm not sure I really understood quite where you were going with them. So let's take just the last one that you made about understanding things like the argument about the cycle of life and so on. What exactly do you mean by understanding? I mean, if the goal is to get people not to reject what we're trying to do on that basis, then presumably it's necessary to do more than just understand it, but to actually try to argue them out of it, no?
Yes, so my point will be that maybe that rather than engaging directly with this type of ideas and bringing a contestation of who is right or who wins the argument or whose ideas are more credible or make more sense, the ideas he proposes to engage in other levels, such as an emotional level, and addressing this idea of reaching people of what they care about, and from there trying to bring them into the debate, if that helps.
Maybe, yeah. So when we're asking questions, there's these surveys, as you mentioned, the Pew Research Foundation has done a few of these things, for example. The first step in asking the right question, we're already familiar with. People, if you ask people whether they want to live a lot longer, you will get a much larger positive response if you say it as, if you emphasize the health of that long life in the question, right? But is there more to it than that? Are there other ways that we could ask these questions and get a more positive response?
Thank you. Yes, and exactly what you emphasize is the idea of bringing health into the equation, and that's why I wanted to show that some surveys are not asking the question of how much do you care about your health? Are you preoccupied with chronic conditions in late life? Are examples in your family and social life of diseases that you would like to avoid? So I think those are ways of entering the conversation that may resonate very much with people. Because I was saying, health is a shared aspiration for everybody. So, and as I showed in the more recent surveys, they are engaging with that idea, and I think that may be very, very helpful.
So then, another thing you said, which I think is quite interesting, is not just to emphasize health, but to de-emphasize the lifespan side of things. I've always felt that actually de-emphasizing it too much can be, there's a risk there, because it sounds like, we all know that lifespan is a side effect of health span, but it sounds as though we're apologizing for that, and kind of saying, yeah, we accept that it's a bad side effect, which of course I don't want to say. I want to celebrate the side effect. But do you think that subtly or indirectly, implicitly apologizing for it is actually a more effective way to get people on side?
Yes, and I would not say apologizing, or as I was saying, it's a lot of what you're bringing first into the conversation. So I would not call it apologizing or saying that it's bad, but I think people will be more open to a conversation when the first idea that you put in the table is about health and living healthier. And of course, a consequence of this will be more lifespan. But again, that's why it's so important, the idea of framing. I think the way in which you present the questions dictates a lot of how there will be reactions and attitudes from the public.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to open this up to the audience. I'll go up to. I think I've probably got the only roving mic, so if anyone wants to ask a question or make a discussion, oh, you've got one as well. Good. Then, yeah. Anyone want to say anything? Jolly good. Up at the front.
Yes, thank you very much, and I appreciate your insights, even though I'm an unapologetic maximum lifespan extensionist who wants to live forever. But I do think you have a valid point in that getting to understand what people's motivations really are and why they hold the views that they do is quite important and valuable in convincing them. But my question for you is, how does that scale? So I can have a one-on-one conversation with a person and really get to know them, get to know their background, their history, why they hold the positions that they do. But that's going to differ across individuals. So I could have conversations with tens of people. I could teach a few other people how to have those conversations. But how do we turn that into a cultural transformation so that we have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of effective persuaders who can actually change people's minds about whether maximum lifespan extension is desirable?
Well, that's a fascinating question, and I think I will turn it back to you, because in many ways what I'm trying to understand is how the community aims to do that. So I don't have a clear answer for that, but I will point your attention in the way in which major initiatives and media are being portrayed. So For example, the X Prize, as we all know, is one of the most important initiatives at the moment. They emphasize a lot this idea of healthy aging. And of course, it's called X Prize Health Span. So just to emphasize how those terms, how that communication matters. And I think there's a lot of, and I've talked about it with some of you here in the coffee breaks, about how the media tends to exacerbate certain narratives that in a way own the framing or own the narrative. So my invitation is to be very, very aware of how the media portrays these ideas, how, for example, reports, popular blogs and websites, how these topics are portrayed. And of course, the value of one-to-one conversations is very important. But as I was suggesting, the movement is gaining attention, is becoming more important. So there's a wider scale in which it should operate.
Yeah, so actually I have one more topic that I'd like to raise, which I've just reminded myself of because I've reminded myself of what I called this session. We've talked so far about talking to the public about longevity, but many of you will know that one of the big reasons that I switched fields and stopped being a perfectly self-respecting computer scientist and became a biologist and a troublemaker was because of my first wife and the appalling discovery that I made after we'd been together for a couple of years that she wasn't interested in aging. And I'm here specifically talking about scientists, academics. It seems to me that there remains an enormous cultural divide between scientists whose motivations are curiosity-driven and who want to find things out and understand the universe, for the sake of finding things out, versus the more goal-directed technologists, among whom I would certainly count myself. It seems to me that divide is not just at the level of culture; it's actually at the level of skill sets as well. And I think I feel that it still causes a problem in the field and holds us back. Have you had the same experience?
Yes, and I think a point from in my university, for example, I also collaborate and interact with many scientists working in gerontology, and they address gerontology from a different perspective, from an epidemiological, statistical perspective, and many of them are not familiar with the geroscience and longevity research. And I think in one side it's a function of not sharing the same values about what science is for, and so that's why it needs to reinforce the message that this is to improve people's life and actually deliver the goals of medicine, which is alleviate suffering and disease. Of course, the life sciences is changing substantially. There's this emergence of startups and translational research, which seeks to deliver results faster. And I think that's a good wave to ride to get closer to the translational paradigm and share this excitement about moving faster.
Yeah. So you use the word suffering there, and I use the word suffering a lot, as the goal is to alleviate suffering. I was talking to somebody a couple of nights ago who said, it might be the wrong word. It gives too much of a connotation of the suffering at the very end of life. Like we need more morphine, things like that. And that really, the emphasis should be on language like quality of life. Trying to improve quality of life. And that actually leads me to another point that I think comes under the heading of talking to academics about longevity. Social gerontologists and actually geriatricians, I find, are very predominantly, really deeply opposed to what they would call the medicalization of aging, and calling aging a disease, calling it even a medical problem, because there's a genuinely deep-seated belief that doing so somehow undermines the dignity of the elderly and makes them into like diminished people. And I've never been able to understand that. Have you experienced that? What do you think? How should one tackle that?
Yeah, that's a key question, and well, and first on your question of whether suffering or quality of life, I think it's also an empirical question, and that's why I suggest more surveys need to be developed, compared to see what works, what sticks, and how different framings lead to different responses. I think the medicalization of aging, the underlying critique is the idea that the diseases can be treated only with technology, and it sort of puts aside the social dimensions of disease and the social factors, and turns management of disease into just a matter of treatments or more drugs or more tests. So I think one way that could be healthy for these conversations is to engage more with the question of healthy lifestyles, and this has been a topic that has been brought into the conversation. I think someone mentioned to go with your mom's recommendation, but I think that can resonate to people, to say that the community is seeking to develop both pharmacological and cell-based strategies in conjunction to better access to healthcare, healthy lifestyles, and social determinants of health. So I think that establishing bridges with that conversation can be helpful, and can bring more trust in the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the first step is just to have the dialogue at all. There's a number of us here every year we go to the Gerontological Society of America meeting, which, the biggest joke of that meeting is that people think of it as essentially 4 separate meetings happening in the same hotel at the same time, because the biologists and the clinicians and the social gerontologists never talk to each other at all. And it's a hard problem to solve. That society has tried to solve that problem in many ways over the years and never really got anywhere. Any other comments from the audience? David?
I wanted to ask you both about a word that was on Alberto's slides a lot, a 5-letter word, trust. And you were basically emphasizing that, well, in the words of the old saying, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. So what do you think might help the public as a whole to trust this community? Is it that we need to be speaking with a clearer single voice? Because after all, there are many in the longevity science field who are still pretty skeptical about any real progress anytime soon. There's a lot who are saying the time is nigh, but there's a lot who are also saying, well, we're going to be in this for another 30 or 40 years. Is there something else that we should be doing to earn more trust? Are there things that we should beware doing because we're going to turn the public off and make them run away from us, no matter how cleverly we speak to them?
Yeah, let me take that first, because you're completely right, David and Alberto, that trust is absolutely essential for all of this, and indeed, I feel that the main basis of my success in being able to maintain a reasonable amount of income into various organizations over the past 20 years has precisely been by getting people to trust me enough to write me a check, and I think a lot of that is about humility, not saying that we're sure that such and such a thing is going to happen in such and such a time frame. I'm always extremely careful to make probabilistic time frame estimates rather than declarative ones. And, perhaps other things like that, making it very obvious that one is doing this for humanitarian purposes rather than for personal financial gain or anything like that. I think those things are very, very important, and they're going to carry on being so.
No, I fully agree. And I will add 2 points. The first one on hype, and as Aubrey is mentioning, it's very important to keep the conversation open and not give promises of this will happen, this will be like this, but give the idea that this is a goal which we are working towards, an aspiration, and everybody is involved in this. That would really be helpful. And the idea of trust, I think is widely studied in the social sciences. And I was mentioning the example of vaccines, and with COVID, many people didn't put into question whether the mRNA vaccines worked or not, or whether the experiments were legitimate. Many people were asking about the medical establishment. Many people were saying, well, if we have been forgotten, and only now they ask us to try something that has been developed for 8 months, why should we this time care about this? And the same happens also with genetically modified organisms, which is also a topic that we can derive many lessons. Many people they were not questioning the ideas of gene transfer and gene contamination. They were asking, who is developing this? What are the interests of these companies? Do they want to control food production? How do we know what are we putting in our bodies? So that's why I point out to the idea of trust and being very transparent about the purposes of the field and how it aims to work for everybody, and along with these social interventions on health, which portray the idea that we all share a common purpose.